Mmusi Maimane deserves to be in parliament, and I think he is worthy of consideration. I've got 5 reasons why I think that Mmusi Maimane deserves to be in parliament and is worthy of consideration. Hear me out. Number 1, he cares about education. Number 2, he's a good and kind man. Number 3, he has shared his platform with youth and women. Number 4, I think that he was thrown under the bus by the Democratic Alliance. And number 5, I think that the program of racial diversity and reconciliation is still important in political parties and nationally. Let me go into each of these. Education remains the biggest crisis in South Africa, and education remains one of the best opportunities for a household and a family to change their economic outcomes in a generation. However, the biggest failure of the ANC government, in my opinion, has been the miseducation of the youth of South Africa. They have not prepared them for economic opportunities adequately, and they've not prepared them for the future. Last year, we saw the rise and emergence of ChatGPT. We saw artificial intelligence really take front stage, and we've seen the accelerations in artificial intelligence that have continued up until this point. But South Africa seems to be lagging behind in preparing young people for futures and careers in programming and computer science. Last year, the number of students who wrote CAT, Computer Applications Technology, was only 48,000. 48,000. The number of people who sat for the matric exams was 715,000. As a percentage, the number of students who sat for CAT versus the number of students who wrote all of the matric exams is 6%. 6%. That's a very slow rollout, considering the applications that are currently on the market. We are seeing companies like Boston Dynamics make robots. We're seeing even Tesla make robots. The advancement in self-driving and automation, the advancement in artificial intelligence indicate that there's an education emergency, and there's a need to fix that emergency. Going a little bit further, there were only 41,000 students who passed mathematics with over 60% last year. There were only 35,000 students who passed physical science with over 60% last year. As a percentage, the number of students who passed maths with over 60% was 16%. The number of students who passed physical science, 17% at that level. This is the level that is the National Planning Commission level. That's what they're trying to achieve. So they're only hitting 16% on maths, 17% on physical science. This is a crisis. Add to that the fact that 80%, 81% has gone up of grade 4s cannot read for meaning at the lowest level of comprehension. Add to that only 37% of bachelor's passes are coming from the no-fee paying schools of all of the bachelor's passes, right? Basically, one in 3 of the bachelor's passes are coming from the no-fee paying schools. The predominant of them are coming from these Model C schools, Quintile 4, Quintile 5 schools. This indicates that there's a crisis here. Singapore prioritized education. India prioritized education. China prioritized education. You cannot hit the economic objectives and priorities that most South Africans have without fixing the education system, basic education, early childhood education, as well as fixing the TVET institutions and university access. Right now, we saw an article saying that 60% of all first years drop out of university. 10% of the university, the TVET throughput rate is 10%. These numbers are not good. And even the World Economic Forum, the Global Competitiveness Index, say that word child me, shows that South Africa is not ranking high in terms of quality of education. I think it's 109 out of 141, if I'm not mistaken. So that is something that I think in and of itself is worth having someone in parliament for. Someone who's going to fight for education, someone who's got a vision for education. I read the manifesto. I think that it's good on education. I also think that Mmusi is a good and kind man. He's an ethical man, And you need some of that. A lot of politicians are ruthless. They play the game and they go hard. You don't know what their values are, you don't know what their ethics are. It's good to have people whose values and ethics you know and you understand. And I think that's something that's worthy of consideration. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying you'll agree with all of his values and ethics. I'm saying it's worthwhile to have people like that in the parliamentary benches, so to speak. Going to number three, he has shared the platform with youth and women. When I've looked at the Build One South Africa candidate list, number one is Mmusi Maimane, number two is Nobuntu Hlazo Webster, number three is Ayanda Ali, number four is Kathy Berman. I don't know if I've got them all correct. But in that top four, it's one man, three women. A lot of young people have been given platform as well to provide leadership, to provide ideas, to provide thinking. I think that's indicative of a person who believes in young people, who's willing to give them platform. I'm not saying he's the only one doing that. I've seen similar, patterns of youth inclusion all across the organization, from the EFF. I've seen it from Rise Mzansi as well. Whatever you think about those parties, they are giving opportunities to young people. But I think Mmusi Maimane is doing the same. I also think that Mmusi Maimane was thrown under the bus by the Democratic Alliance. In 2019, it was going to be a very difficult election to win because big business had backed the ANC. If you recall, we marched against Zuma, we were given days off. There was a big media campaign, which was basically helping Cyril to come in. And it was going to be very difficult for anybody to really gain traction in that environment because Cyril was able to stop the ANC losses, and some of the DA supporters went to Freedom Front Plus, but also I don't think that was his fault. I think that if the DA was serious about becoming a 30% party, they did need to prioritize diversity. They did need to show Black South Africans, colored South Africans, that they are serious about the issues of diversity, including the diversification of the benches of parliament. I think he got a lot of resistance internally. If they had all just accepted some of those ideas, really backed their guy and not tried to undermine him, I think that a lot of that stuff would have been digestible to the DA membership and base, but they didn't do that. But further, I think that then they threw him under the bus and said he was the problem. He was the reason why they didn't do well in that election. It was very difficult to beat Ramaphoria. Ramaphoria was a real thing, and people were really excited. I remember Zapiro drew cartoons of, Cyril Ramaphosa as the Black Panther. That's how much euphoria there was. So they threw him under the bus, and I think he deserves a chance to show what he can do in his own name, under his own leadership, without all of these other dynamics where he's being undermined left, right, and center. That's what I think. I think people deserve a second chance, and I think he does, and he's worthy of consideration. Number five, I think that the project of racial diversity and reconciliation still matters in South Africa. There are massive problems with inequality, and one race benefited more than others. One race does control a lot of the resources and wealth in South Africa, and that has to be addressed, and economic opportunities and equitable economic opportunities have to be created. And in some instances, there have to be tough conversations about land. There have to be tough conversations about housing. All of those things need to happen. The racial pain in South Africa has still not been addressed. That's all true. I think you need people who can navigate those terrains and be able to have the personality, the demeanor, and the emotional intelligence to bring people together to have those tough conversations. One of the things which the world loves about South Africa is that story of reconciliation. It may not be a genuine story. It may not be a story that really reflects how people experience their day-to-day living, because on a daily basis you will have racist attacks. On a daily basis you will have instances where you feel structural racism. For many South Africans, if you're living in the Western Cape in places like Khayelitsha and Langa, you feel it daily. The structural pain that still exists to drive far or to catch transport and go far away from where you live to get to work. All of those things are still manifestations of apartheid design, and you need those things to be addressed. But there is value to creating a brand that says to the world, we are able to come together, to pull together and create a melting pot of races, of tribes. The world loves that fabric. and they're willing to invest in it, they're willing to back it. And I think that Mmusi Maimane Build One South Africa, that's part of what their offering is that they can be part of that racial and social cohesion. And I think you need that. We do have extremist parties. We do have parties that are either far to the right or far to the left. And you need a balancing mechanism in parliament. And I think that Mmusi Maimane and his party provide that. And for those reasons, I think that Mmusi Maimane is worthy of your consideration for parliament.